Hello, and welcome back to English in Fluency. I am your host, Alex, and I am so incredibly happy to have you here with me today. If you are ready to take your English listening skills to the next level, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we have a very special, feature-length episode prepared for you. We are going to focus on a skill that is absolutely essential for B1 learners and beyond. We are going to learn how to understand cause and effect in English. This means we will learn how to connect ideas, how to understand why things happen, and how to follow a story without getting lost. Have you ever listened to a conversation and understood the individual words, but missed the main point? Have you ever wondered why a character in a movie did something, but you missed the explanation? That usually happens because we miss the connecting words. We miss the words that signal a cause, and the words that signal an effect. Today, we are going to fix that. To make this lesson fun and memorable, I had written a brand new story just for you. It is a story about a mystery in a small, beautiful town, and we are going to use this story to practice our listening. But before we start, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy our lessons and you want to help us create more free content, please take a moment right now to click the subscribe button and hit the like button on this video. It really helps our channel grow, and it ensures you never miss a lesson. Now, take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and let's begin. To understand cause and effect, you need to listen for specific signal words. The most common word for a cause is because. The most common word for an effect is so. Think of it like a chain reaction. First, something happens. That is the cause. Then, something else happens as a result. That is the effect. For example, if I say, "It was raining, so I took my umbrella," the rain is the cause. Taking the umbrella is the effect. The word "so" connects them. If I switch it around, I can say, "I took my umbrella because it was raining." The meaning is the same, but the grammar changes slightly. Today, we will practice listening for these connections in a story called The Baker's Secret. Let me introduce you to our main character. Her name is Silas. Silas is a young man who lives in the quiet village of Oakhaven. Oakhaven is famous for one thing. It is famous for its apple festival. Every year, people travel from all over the country to visit Oakhaven because the pastries at the festival are delicious. Notice that sentence. People travel because the pastries are delicious. The delicious pastries are the cause. The traveling is the effect. Now, Silas works at the most popular bakery in town, which is owned by a kind woman named Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins is old, but she is very energetic. However, this morning, something was wrong. Silas arrived at the bakery at 5 a.m., just like he always did. The sun was not up yet, so the street was dark and quiet. He unlocked the front door and walked into the kitchen. Usually the kitchen smells like cinnamon and warm sugar. But today, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast. Silas frowned. He looked around the room. The ovens were cold. The lights were off. Mrs. Higgins was usually baking by now, but she was nowhere to be seen. Silas felt a knot of worry in his stomach because Mrs. Higgins was never late. He called out her name, but there was no answer. He walked to the back office and pushed the door open. What he saw surprised him. Mrs. Higgins was sitting in her chair, looking very sad. She was holding a small, empty wooden box. Silas asked her what was wrong. Mrs. Higgins looked up with tears in her eyes. She told Silas that the bakery might have to close. Silas was shocked. He asked why. Mrs. Higgins explained that her secret recipe book was missing. This book was very important because it contained the secret recipe for the famous apple pie. Without that recipe, she could not bake for the festival. And since the festival was only 2 days away, this was a disaster. Let's pause here for a moment and analyze what we just heard. There are several cause and effect relationships in this scene. Why was Silas worried? He was worried because Mrs. Higgins was never late. Why might the bakery close? The bakery might close because the recipe book is missing. Why is the missing book a disaster? It is a disaster since the festival is only 2 days away. Did you hear the word since? We use since in the same way we use because. It explains the reason. Let's continue with the story. Silas looked at the empty wooden box. He knew he had to help Mrs. Higgins. He told her that he would find the book. Mrs. Higgins smiled weakly, but she was still worried. She said she had left the book in the box last night, so someone must have taken it. Silas decided to investigate. He looked at the lock on the back door. The lock was broken. This was a clue. Since the lock was broken, Silas knew that someone had broken in. He walked outside to look for footprints. It had rained the night before, so the ground was soft and muddy. This is a great example for us. The rain is the cause. The soft, muddy ground is the effect. Because the ground was muddy, Silas could see footprints clearly. He saw 2 sets of footprints. One set belonged to a pair of large boots. The other set belonged to small sneakers. Silas followed the footprints. They led away from the bakery and toward the town square. Silas walked quickly because he wanted to catch the thief before they left town. As he walked, he thought about who would want to steal the recipe. There was a rival baker in the next town named Mr. Crumb. Mr. Crumb was jealous of Mrs. Higgins because her pies always won the first prize. Silas suspected Mr. Crumb. However, he needed proof. He could not accuse Mr. Crumb just because he was jealous. He needed evidence. Silas arrived at the town square. It was early morning, so there were not many people around. He saw the footprints lead toward the old library. Silas was confused. Why would a thief go to the library? He walked up the library steps and tried the door. It was locked. He looked through the window. Inside, he saw a light on in the back corner. This was strange, because the library did not open until 9 a.m. Silas decided to wait. He hid behind a large oak tree so that he could watch the door without being seen. We use "so that" to explain a purpose or a reason. He hid behind the tree. Why? The purpose was to watch the door. While Silas waited, he took out his phone. He wanted to call his friend, Clara. Clara was the sheriff's daughter, so she knew a lot about investigating crimes. Silas called her and explained the situation. Clara listened carefully. She told Silas to stay put. She said she would come to the square immediately because she wanted to help. Silas felt relieved. He was glad he called Clara since 2 heads are better than 1. While he waited for Clara, the library door opened. Silas held his breath. A man walked out. He was wearing a long gray coat and a hat that covered his face. He was carrying a bag. Silas wanted to run after him, but he remembered Clara's advice. She had told him to wait, so he stayed behind the tree. The man in the gray coat looked left and right. He seemed nervous. He started walking quickly down the street. Just then, Clara arrived on her bicycle. She saw Silas and waved. Silas pointed at the man in the gray coat. Clara nodded. She turned her bicycle and followed the man. Silas ran behind her. The man turned a corner and went into a small coffee shop. Clara stopped her bike and waited for Silas to catch up. She whispered that they should go inside. Silas was hesitant because he did not want the man to see them. But Clara said it was okay because the coffee shop was crowded. They walked inside. The smell of coffee was strong. They looked around. The man in the gray coat was sitting at a table in the back. He had the bag on the table. Silas and Clara sat at a nearby table. They pretended to look at the menu, but they were actually watching the man. The man opened the bag and took out a book. Silas gasped. It was a blue book with gold letters. It looked exactly like Mrs. Higgins's recipe book. Silas started to stand up, but Clara grabbed his arm. She told him to wait. She said they needed to be sure. She whispered that they should listen to him. The man took out his phone and made a call. He spoke very quietly, so Silas and Clara had to lean in to hear him. The man said, "I have the book. The deal is done." Silas felt angry. He was angry because this man had stolen from Mrs. Higgins. He wanted to confront the man right now. However, Clara had a different idea. She whispered to Silas that they should follow the man to see who he was meeting. She thought that if they followed him, they could catch the person who hired him. This is a complex thought. Let's break it down. If they follow him, the result will be catching the boss. This is a conditional cause and effect. The man stood up and left the coffee shop. Silas and Clara followed him again. This time, the man walked toward the train station. Silas was worried. If the man got on a train, they would lose him. The train station was busy because it was the morning rush hour. People were rushing everywhere, so it was hard to see the man. Silas stood on his tiptoes to look over the crowd. He saw the gray hat near the ticket booth. The man was buying a ticket. Silas looked at the departure board. The next train was leaving in 5 minutes. They had to act fast. Clara had an idea. She told Silas to create a distraction. She said that if Silas distracted the man, she could grab the bag. Silas was nervous, but he agreed because he wanted to save the bakery. He walked toward the ticket booth. He pretended to trip and fall. He shouted loudly as he fell. Everyone in the station looked at Silas, including the man in the gray coat. The man turned around to see what happened. As a result of this distraction, he looked away from his bag. Clara seized the moment. She ran past the man and grabbed the bag from the counter. The man shouted, "Hey!" But Clara was already running toward the exit. Silas stood up quickly and ran after Clara. The man chased them. They ran out of the station and into the street. They ran fast because they were scared. They turned into an alleyway and hid behind a dumpster. They could hear the man running past the alley. He did not see them. Silas and Clara were breathing heavily. Their hearts were pounding because of the adrenaline. Clara looked at Silas and smiled. She held up the bag. They had done it. Or so they thought. Clara opened the bag to check the book. She pulled it out. Silas looked at the cover. His face fell. He was disappointed because it was not the recipe book. It was a dictionary. A blue dictionary with gold letters. It looked just like the recipe book, but it was not the right one. Silas felt terrible. He felt terrible because they had just stolen a dictionary from a stranger. And worse, they still did not know where the real recipe book was. They had followed the wrong clue, and as a result, they were back to square one. Let's take a moment to review the cause and effect in this part of the story. Why did Silas trip and fall? He did it to create a distraction. What was the result of the distraction? The man looked away from his bag. Why did Clara grab the bag? She grabbed it because she thought the recipe book was inside. Why was Silas disappointed? He was disappointed since the book was just a dictionary. You see how the story moves forward? Every action causes a reaction. Now, Silas and Clara were in a difficult situation. They had a stolen bag, and they had lost the trail of the real thief. They decided to return the bag to the station's lost and found. They did this because it was the right thing to do. Afterward, they walked back to the town square. Silas felt hopeless. He sat on a bench and put his head in his hands. He thought about Mrs. Higgins. She was probably waiting for him. He felt like he had failed her. Clara sat next to him. She told him not to give up. She said they still had clues. She reminded him about the broken lock at the bakery. She asked him if he saw anything else near the door. Silas thought hard. He remembered something. He remembered seeing a small piece of red fabric caught in the door frame. He hadn't thought it was important at the time, so he ignored it. But now, he realized it might be a clue. The thief must have torn their clothes on the broken lock. Since the fabric was red, they needed to look for someone wearing red clothes. Suddenly, Silas's eyes widened. He remembered something else. He remembered that Mr. Crumb, the rival baker, had a delivery driver who wore a red uniform. Could it be him? Silas told Clara his theory. Clara nodded slowly. She said it was a good lead. She suggested they go to Mr. Crumb's bakery to investigate. They stood up, feeling a new wave of energy. They had a new plan. Because they had a new clue, they had new hope. They walked toward Mr. Crumb's bakery, which was on the other side of town. As they walked, the sky began to turn gray. Clouds gathered overhead. It looked like it was going to rain again. Silas hoped it wouldn't rain because rain would wash away any more footprints. They walked faster. When they arrived at Mr. Crumb's bakery, the shop was closed. The sign on the door said, "Closed for private event." This was suspicious. Why would a bakery be closed on a Tuesday morning? Usually, bakeries are open early. Silas and Clara walked around to the back of the shop. There was a delivery van parked in the back. It was a white van, but the driver was not there. Silas touched the hood of the van. It was warm. This meant the van had been driven recently. This was a clear cause and effect. The engine was warm because it had been running. Silas looked through the window of the van. The back seat was empty. However, on the front seat, there was a piece of paper. It looked like a map. Silas tried the door handle. It was unlocked. He opened the door carefully and picked up the map. It was a map of Oakhaven. There was a red circle drawn around a specific location. The location was the old abandoned flour mill at the edge of the river. Why would the driver go to the old mill? The mill had been closed for years. It was dangerous because the floors were rotten. Silas showed the map to Clara. She looked worried. She said that if the thief was at the mill, they had to be careful. The mill was far away from town, so no one would hear them if they called for help. Despite the danger, they knew they had to go. They had to go because Mrs. Higgins was counting on them. They started walking toward the river. The wind picked up, blowing leaves across the path. The atmosphere was getting spooky. Silas felt a shiver down his spine. Was it because of the cold wind? Or was it because of fear? Probably both. As they approached the old mill, they saw a light flickering in the window. Someone was definitely inside. They crept closer, moving slowly so they wouldn't make any noise. The wooden steps of the mill were old and creaky. Silas stepped on a loose board, and it made a loud creak. He froze. They waited to see if anyone heard them. Silence. They continued up the stairs. They reached the main door. It was slightly open. Silas peeked inside. What he saw made his jaw drop. In the middle of the room, there was a table. On the table sat the blue recipe book with gold letters. But that wasn't all. Standing next to the table was not Mr. Crumb. It was not the delivery driver in the red uniform. It was someone Silas knew very well. It was the mayor of the town, Mayor Green. Silas was confused. Why would the mayor steal the recipe book? The mayor did not bake. It didn't make any sense. Silas pulled his head back and whispered to Clara. "It's the mayor!" Clara looked shocked. She whispered back, "Are you sure?" Silas nodded. They needed to know why. They needed to hear what the mayor was saying. They leaned closer to the door. The mayor was talking on his phone. He sounded angry. He said, "I have the book. No one will be able to make the pies. The festival will be ruined." Silas felt a surge of anger. The mayor wanted to ruin the festival? But why? The festival brought money to the town. If the festival failed, the town would lose money. It seemed illogical. Silas listened more closely. The mayor continued, "If the festival is a failure, property prices will drop. And when they drop, I can buy the land for the new shopping mall." Now it all made sense. The cause was greed. The mayor wanted to build a shopping mall. To do that, he needed the land to be cheap. To make the land cheap, he needed the town to lose money. To make the town lose money, he had to ruin the festival. And the best way to ruin the festival was to steal the famous apple pie recipe. It was a long chain of cause and effect. Greed led to the theft. The theft would lead to a ruined festival. A ruined festival would lead to cheap land. Silas and Clara looked at each other. They had solved the mystery of who and why. But now they had a bigger problem. How were they going to get the book back? The mayor was a powerful man. If they just walked in, he might call the police and accuse them of trespassing. They needed a plan. Clara noticed that the book was sitting on the edge of the table. The mayor was pacing back and forth, looking out the window. Clara pointed to the rafters, the wooden beams on the ceiling. There was a rope hanging from one of the beams. It looked like an old pulley system used for lifting flour bags. The rope hung right above the table. Clara mimed pulling the rope. She thought that if they pulled the rope, the hook at the end might catch the book or knock it off the table. It was a risky idea. If they missed, the mayor would see them. Silas shook his head. It was too dangerous. He pointed to the floor. There was a bucket of old nails near the door. He had a different idea. He whispered to Clara, "We can make a noise to distract him, just like at the train station. When he looks away, I will run in and grab the book." Clara didn't like it. "He knows who you are," she whispered. "If he sees you, you will be in trouble." While they were arguing in whispers, the wind outside blew the door. It creaked loudly. The mayor spun around. "Who's there?" he shouted. Silas and Clara froze. There was nowhere to hide. The mayor walked toward the door. His footsteps were heavy on the wooden floor. Silas's heart was beating so fast he thought the mayor could hear it. He looked at Clara. She looked terrified. The mayor kicked the door open. He saw them. "Silas?" Clara? The mayor looked surprised, and then his face turned red with anger. What are you doing here? He demanded. Silas stood up straight. He decided to be brave. We know what you are doing, Mayor Green. We heard everything. You stole Mrs. Higgins's book because you want to build a mall. The mayor laughed. It was a cold, mean laugh. You are smart children, he said. But who will believe you? I am the mayor. You are just a baker's boy and a teenager. No one will listen to you. The mayor was confident because he had power. He thought his power would protect him. He took the book and held it tight. Now, leave, he said, or I will call the police and tell them you tried to break into the old mill. Silas didn't move. He knew he couldn't leave without the book. If he left, Mrs. Higgins would lose her bakery. He looked at the mayor. He looked at the book. He calculated the distance. It was about 3 meters. Could he run fast enough? Suddenly, a loud crash came from the back of the room. A window shattered. Everyone turned to look. A black cat had jumped through the broken window, knocking over a pile of old cans. The noise was startling. The mayor jumped back in surprise. As he jumped, he dropped the book. This was the chance. The cause was the cat. The effect was the distraction. Silas didn't think. He reacted. He lunged forward. He dove onto the floor and grabbed the book. The mayor shouted, "No!" and tried to grab Silas's leg. Silas kicked his leg free and scrambled to his feet. "Run!" Silas yelled to Clara. They turned and ran down the stairs as fast as they could. The mayor was chasing them. "Come back here!" he screamed. But Silas and Clara were faster. They were younger, and they were running on adrenaline. They burst out of the mill and into the cold air. They didn't stop. They ran through the woods, jumping over logs and dodging branches. They didn't look back. They ran all the way back to the main road. They were exhausted, panting for air. But Silas was clutching the blue book to his chest. He checked the cover. He opened it. He saw the handwriting of Mrs. Higgins. He saw the recipe for apple pie. It was the real book. They had done it. They walked back to town, tired but happy. They went straight to the bakery. Mrs. Higgins was still sitting in the office, looking sad. When Silas walked in and placed the book on her desk, she couldn't believe her eyes. She started to cry, but this time they were tears of joy. She hugged Silas and Clara. She asked them how they found it. Silas and Clara looked at each other. They decided not to tell her about the mayor just yet. They didn't want to ruin her happiness. They just said they found it in a safe place. Mrs. Higgins was so relieved because now she could bake for the festival. The bakery was saved. But the story isn't over yet. The mayor was still out there. He was angry, and he was powerful. And he knew that Silas and Clara knew his secret. Silas knew that the mayor would not give up easily. He would try to get revenge. He would try to stop them from telling the truth. As Silas walked home that evening, he felt a strange sensation. He felt like he was being watched. He turned around, but the street was empty. He walked a little faster. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message was short. It said, "This isn't over. Watch your back." Silas swallowed hard. The mystery of the missing book was solved, but a new danger had begun. The cause was their bravery. The effect was a new enemy. What would the mayor do next? Now, we are going to move into the second part of our story, where we will look at more formal and varied ways to express cause and effect. We will practice using words like consequently, due to, therefore, and thanks to. These words will help you sound more professional and fluent. The morning after the chase at the old mill, the sun rose over Oakhaven with a bright, golden light. It was the day before the Apple Festival. Usually, this is the happiest day of the year. However, Silas did not feel happy. He felt anxious. He had hardly slept the night before. He kept waking up because every small noise sounded like the mayor coming to get him. Due to his lack of sleep, Silas had dark circles under his eyes. Listen to that phrase, due to his lack of sleep. We use due to explain the cause, often when the result is negative. Silas was tired due to the stress. He drank a cup of strong coffee and walked to the bakery. The streets were already busy. People were hanging colorful banners and setting up tables for the festival. The air smelled of fresh pine and crisp autumn leaves. When Silas arrived at the bakery, the atmosphere was completely different from the day before. Yesterday, it was sad and quiet. Today, it was loud and busy. Thanks to Silas and Clara, Mrs. Higgins had her book back. We use thanks to when the cause is something positive. Thanks to the book, the kitchen was full of activity. Mrs. Higgins was singing a happy song as she peeled mountains of green apples. Flour was flying everywhere like snow. "Good morning, Silas," Mrs. Higgins chirped. She looked 10 years younger. "Grab an apron. We have lost a lot of time, therefore, we must work twice as fast." Did you hear, therefore? It connects the problem to the solution. We lost time, therefore we must hurry. It is a very strong, logical word. Silas nodded and washed his hands. He tried to smile, but his hands were shaking slightly. He couldn't stop thinking about the mayor. He didn't want to worry Mrs. Higgins, so he decided to keep the text message a secret. He started rolling out the dough for the pie crusts. The rhythm of the work helped him calm down. Roll, flip, flour. Roll, flip, flour. For 3 hours, everything went perfectly. The bakery was a machine of productivity. The first batch of pies was in the oven. The smell of cinnamon and baked apples began to drift out into the street. Customers were already lining up outside, eager to taste the practice batches. However, just as Silas was putting the second batch into the oven, the lights flickered. They buzzed like an angry bee, and then, zap. The bakery went completely dark. The hum of the large electric ovens died down into silence. The mixer stopped spinning. "Oh, dear," Mrs. Higgins said, her voice trembling in the darkness. What happened? Silas grabbed a flashlight from the drawer. "It's probably just a fuse," he said, trying to sound brave. "We are using a lot of electricity. Consequently, the system might have overloaded." Here, consequently, means as a result. Silas walked to the back of the shop where the electrical box was located. He shone his flashlight on the metal box. He expected to see a flipped switch. But when he opened the door of the box, his stomach dropped. The wires inside hadn't just tripped. They were cut. Someone had used a sharp tool to slice through the main power cables. Silas felt a cold shiver. This was not an accident. This was sabotage. Since the wires were cut clean, it had to be done by a human. He knew exactly who was responsible. Mayor Green. The mayor knew he couldn't steal the book again, so he decided to cut the power instead. If the ovens didn't work, Mrs. Higgins couldn't bake. If she couldn't bake, she couldn't enter the contest. As a result, she would lose. Silas ran back to the kitchen. He had to tell Mrs. Higgins the truth about the power, but not about the mayor. "Mrs. Higgins," he said, "the wires are broken. We can't fix them quickly. It will take days to get an electrician." Mrs. Higgins sat down heavily on a stool. She looked defeated. "If we cannot bake today, we will have nothing for the festival tomorrow," she whispered. "All this work, all these apples, it is all for nothing." Silas couldn't stand to see her so sad. He had to find a solution. He thought fast. They needed heat. They needed an oven that didn't require electricity. He looked out the window. He saw the smoke rising from the chimney of the pizzeria across the street. That was it. The pizzeria used a wood-fired oven. It didn't need electricity. "Mrs. Higgins," Silas said, his voice full of excitement, "I have an idea. Mr. Romano at the pizzeria has a wood oven. Maybe he will let us use it?" Mrs. Higgins looked up. "But Mr. Romano is very grumpy," she said. "He doesn't like anyone in his kitchen." "I will ask him," Silas said. "I will beg him if I have to." Silas ran out of the bakery and across the street. He burst into the pizzeria. Mr. Romano was a large man with a thick mustache. He was kneading pizza dough. He looked at Silas with suspicion. Silas explained the situation. He told him about the power cut. He didn't mention the sabotage. He just said it was an emergency. At first, Mr. Romano said no. He said he needed his oven for pizzas. But Silas pleaded. He said, "Mr. Romano, if Mrs. Higgins doesn't bake, the Apple Festival won't be the same. The whole town loves her pies. Due to this emergency, we need your help." Mr. Romano looked at Silas. Then he looked through the window at Mrs. Higgins's dark bakery. He sighed loudly. "Okay," he grumbled, "but only until 4 p.m. After that, I need to bake pizzas for the dinner rush." Silas thanked him profusely. He ran back to the bakery and told Mrs. Higgins. They didn't have much time. Consequently, they had to move everything across the street. They carried trays of unbaked pies, bowls of filling, and bags of flour. It was a funny sight. People on the street stopped to watch. Silas and Mrs. Higgins running back and forth with pies. Soon, Clara arrived. She saw the commotion and immediately jumped in to help. Thanks to Clara's help, they moved everything in 20 minutes. Inside the pizzeria, it was hot. The wood oven was roaring with fire. It was much harder to control the temperature of a wood oven than an electric one. Silas had to watch the pies constantly. If the fire was too hot, the crust would burn. If it was too cold, the apples wouldn't cook. He stood by the oven, sweat dripping down his face. He focused entirely on the baking. He was exhausted, yet he refused to stop. While Silas baked, Clara decided to investigate the power box at the bakery. She was suspicious. She knew that power cables don't just break. She went to the back alley and looked at the cut wires. She looked at the ground. There, half hidden under a pile of dry leaves, she found something. It was a small, silver object. She picked it up. It was a pair of wire cutters. They were expensive ones, not the cheap kind you buy at the hardware store. On the handle, there were initials engraved, M.G. Clara gasped. M.G. Mayor Green. He had been so careless. Because he was angry and rushing, he must have dropped them. This was evidence. Hard evidence. Clara put the cutters in her pocket. She felt a mix of fear and triumph. They had proof, but who would they show it to? The police in Oak Haven reported to the mayor. If she went to the police station, the mayor might find out. Therefore, she had to be smart. She decided to keep the evidence safe until the right moment. She went back to the pizzeria to check on Silas. "How is it going?" she asked. Silas wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "It's hard," he said. "But look." He pulled a tray of pies out of the wood oven. They were beautiful. The crust was golden brown and bubbly. In fact, they looked even better than usual. The wood smoke had given them a special rustic appearance. "The heat is uneven, so I have to turn them every 2 minutes," Silas explained, "but I think they are going to be delicious." By 4 p.m., they had baked 50 pies. It wasn't as many as they usually made, but it was enough for the contest. They carried the finished pies back to the bakery, which was still dark. They arranged them on the cooling racks. The smell was incredible. It was a mix of sweet apples and a hint of wood smoke. Mrs. Higgins tasted a small piece of crust. Her eyes widened. "Silas," she said, "these are the best pies I have ever made." The wood fire, it added a magic touch. It was a classic example of cause and effect. The sabotage was meant to destroy them. However, it actually forced them to use a better cooking method. As a result, the pies were better than ever. The mayor's plan had backfired. Just as they were finishing, the front door chime rang. Silas looked up. His heart stopped. Walking into the bakery was Mayor Green. He was wearing a fancy suit and a wide, fake smile. He looked around the dark shop. "Oh, terrible news, Mrs. Higgins," the mayor said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I heard about your power outage. Such a shame. Does this mean you will be withdrawing from the contest tomorrow?" Silas stepped forward. He stood in front of Mrs. Higgins, protecting her. He looked the mayor in the eye. "No, Mayor," Silas said firmly. "We are not withdrawing. We found another way to bake." The mayor's smile twitched. He looked surprised. "Is that so?" he said coldly. "Well, that is impressive." He looked at the racks of beautiful golden pies. His eyes narrowed. He was angry, but he couldn't show it. "Well, good luck," the mayor said. "The judges this year are very strict. I am the head judge, you know." He turned and walked out. The threat was clear. Since he was the head judge, he could ensure they didn't win. Even if the pies were perfect, he could give them a low score. Silas felt a wave of hopelessness. They had overcome the theft. They had overcome the sabotage, but they couldn't overcome a corrupt judge. Clara pulled Silas aside. She showed him the wire cutters with the initials MG. "We have him," she whispered. "We can prove he cut the power." Silas shook his head. "If we show this now, he will just say someone stole his tools. He will lie. We need to expose him publicly. We need to do it when he can't escape." "When?" Clara asked. "Tomorrow," Silas said. "At the festival. On the main stage." The night before the festival was long. Silas stayed at the bakery to guard the pies. He slept on the floor with a rolling pin in his hand, just in case. Consequently, he was very stiff the next morning. But the excitement of the festival woke him up. The day of the Apple Festival was bright and crisp. The town square was packed with thousands of people. There were musicians playing fiddles, children riding ponies, and stalls selling cider and jams. In the center of the square was the main stage. This is where the great pie contest would happen at noon. Mrs. Higgins, Silas, and Clara carried the pies to the contest tent. There were 10 other bakers entering the competition. Mr. Crumb was there, looking smug. He had a fancy electric display for his pies. Mrs. Higgins's display was simple, but her pies smelled the best. The judges sat at a long table on the stage. There were 3 judges. Two were food critics from the city, and the third was Mayor Green. The mayor sat in the middle, looking like a king. He was wearing a sash that said, "Head Judge." The competition began. The judges tasted the pies one by one. They ate Mr. Crumb's pie. They nodded politely. Then came the turn of Mrs. Higgins's pie. Silas watched nervously. A server cut a slice of the wood-fired apple pie and placed it in front of the mayor. The mayor picked up his fork. He took a bite. Silas saw the mayor's eyes widen for a split second. The pie was undeniable. It was perfect. But then the mayor's face changed. He made a disgusted face. He spat the pie out into a napkin. "Yuck!" the mayor shouted into the microphone. His voice boomed across the square. The crowd went silent. "This pie is terrible. It tastes like smoke. It is burnt." The crowd gasped. Mrs. Higgins looked like she was going to faint. The other two judges looked confused. They had tasted the pie, and they looked like they enjoyed it. But the mayor was the head judge. He had the final say. "I disqualify this entry," the mayor shouted. "It is inedible." Silas felt the blood rushing to his ears. This was it. The mayor was using his power to cheat in front of everyone. Due to his greed, he was destroying Mrs. Higgins's reputation publicly. Silas looked at Clara. Clara nodded. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the wire cutters. She also pulled out the map they had found in the van. Silas didn't think. He didn't plan. He just acted. He jumped onto the stage. "Wait!" he shouted into the microphone. The feedback screech made everyone cover their ears. "Security! Get this boy off the stage!" the mayor yelled, standing up. "He is lying!" Silas shouted to the crowd. "The pie tastes like smoke because we had to bake it in a wood oven. And do you know why?" Silas pointed a shaking finger at the mayor. "Because he cut our power lines," the crowd murmured. People were whispering. "What did he say?" "The mayor." "Lies." The mayor's face was red. "He is a crazy boy." Clara jumped on stage next to Silas. She held up the wire cutters high in the air. "Are these yours, Mayor Green?" she shouted. "They have your initials, MG. We found them next to the cut wires at the bakery." The mayor froze. He looked at the wire cutters. He patted his empty pocket. He realized his mistake. Because he had panicked, he had revealed his guilt. "And that's not all," Silas continued, gaining confidence. He felt the energy of the crowd. They were listening. "He stole the recipe book, too. He wants to ruin the festival." "Why?" someone from the crowd shouted. It was Mr. Romano, the pizza owner. "Why would he do that?" "Because he wants to build a mall here," Silas yelled. "He wants the town to go bankrupt so he can buy the land." The silence in the square was heavy. Everyone looked at the mayor. The mayor looked trapped. He looked left and right. He saw the police chief standing near the stairs. "Chief, arrest them," the mayor ordered. The police chief walked up the stairs slowly. He looked at Silas. He looked at the wire cutters. Then he looked at the mayor. The chief had lived in Oakhaven all his life. He loved the Apple Festival. He looked the mayor in the eye and said, "I think we need to hear the boy out, Mayor." The mayor was furious. "I am your boss," he screamed. Actually, one of the food critics spoke up. She was a famous writer from the city. She stood up and took the microphone. "Regardless of the politics, I must say something about this pie." She took another bite of Mrs. Higgins's pie. "This is not burnt. This is exquisite. It is the best apple pie I have tasted in 20 years. The smoke gives it a depth of flavor that is rare." The crowd cheered. Thanks to the critic's honesty, the tension broke. The mayor realized he had lost control of the narrative. He tried to run. He pushed past the judges and ran toward the back of the stage. "Get him!" Mr. Romano shouted. But the mayor was fast. He jumped off the stage and disappeared into the crowd. The confusion was total. People were shouting, children were crying, and the police were trying to push through the mob. Silas and Clara stood on the stage, breathing hard. They had exposed the truth. However, the mayor had escaped. And a man like Mayor Green does not run away to hide. He runs away to regroup. Mrs. Higgins walked up to them. She was crying, but she was smiling. She hugged them both tight. "You saved me," she whispered. "You saved the bakery." The food critic announced the winner. For the best pie in the country, the first prize goes to Mrs. Higgins. The crowd erupted in applause. It was a moment of pure joy. But as Silas looked out over the cheering crowd, he saw something that made his blood run cold. At the edge of the square, near the parking lot, he saw a black car. The window rolled down. The mayor was sitting in the back seat. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking directly at Silas. And he wasn't angry anymore. He was smiling. A calm, terrifying smile. The car drove away slowly, disappearing down the road that led out of town. Silas realized that this wasn't just about a bakery anymore. The mayor had lost his reputation, his job, and his plan for the mall. Consequently, he had nothing left to lose. A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous enemy of all. Later that evening, the sun set on a changed Oak Haven. The festival continued, but the mood was different. People were talking in small groups, discussing the scandal. Silas and Clara sat on the bakery steps, eating a slice of the winning pie. "What do you think he will do?" Clara asked quietly. "I don't know," Silas admitted, "but he isn't gone. He still owns a lot of property in this town, and he has money." "We need to be ready," Clara said. "Next time, he won't use wire cutters. He will use something worse." Just then, Silas's phone buzzed again. He hesitated. He didn't want to look. Because of the text yesterday, he was afraid. But he knew he had to facing it. He picked up the phone. It wasn't a text message this time. It was a video file sent from an anonymous number. Silas pressed play. The video was shaky. It showed the inside of the old mill. But it wasn't empty. There were boxes stacked everywhere. The camera zoomed in on a label on one of the boxes. It read, "Dynamite, property of Oak Haven Mining Company." The video ended. The screen went black. Silas dropped the phone. His hands were trembling uncontrollably. Dynamite? Why did the mayor have dynamite? And why was it at the old mill? "What is it?" Clara asked, grabbing his arm. "He's not just going to ruin the festival," Silas whispered, his voice dry with horror. "He's going to destroy the evidence. He's going to blow up the old mill." "But—" Clara paused, her eyes widening as she realized the connection. "The old mill is right next to the town dam. If the mill explodes—" "The dam breaks," Silas finished the sentence. "And if the dam breaks, the river will flood the whole town. Oak Haven will be underwater." This was the ultimate cause and effect. The explosion causes the dam to break. The broken dam causes the flood. The flood destroys everything. The mayor was planning to wash away the town that rejected him. "We have to stop him," Clara said, standing up. "We have to go back to the mill." "Now?" Silas asked. "It's dark." "We don't have a choice," Clara said. "Therefore, we go." Silas looked at the town square. He saw the families laughing, the lights twinkling, the children playing. They had no idea that a disaster was waiting for them just a few miles up the river. He looked at Mrs. Higgins inside the bakery, polishing her trophy. She looked so peaceful. Silas stood up. He tightened his shoelaces. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." They ran toward the river path, leaving the safety of the lights behind. The night was dark, and the wind was howling. A storm was coming, both in the sky and on the ground. We are now entering the final and most dangerous part of our story, where we will see if Silas and Clara can save Oakhaven. Along the way, we will practice using advanced connecting words like otherwise, unless, and provided that. These words are the glue that holds complex English together. The wind was howling like a wolf as Silas and Clara ran toward the old mill. The storm had finally arrived. Rain began to fall, cold and sharp against their faces. The path to the river was slippery with mud. Silas almost fell twice, but he kept running. He knew that unless they reached the mill in time, the town would be destroyed. Listen to that sentence. Unless they reached the mill. The word unless means if not. It creates a condition. If they do not reach the mill, the result will be destruction. It adds urgency. The roar of the river grew louder. The water was already high because of the heavy rain earlier in the week. The dam, which held back the massive reservoir, loomed above them in the darkness. It looked like a giant concrete wall. At the base of the dam stood the old mill. It was a dark wooden skeleton of a building. There were no lights on inside. It looked abandoned. But Silas knew better. He knew the mayor was inside, and he knew there was dynamite. They reached the heavy wooden door of the mill. It was closed. Silas pushed it, but it was locked. "We have to get in," Clara shouted over the noise of the wind. "Otherwise, we can't stop him." Here is another key word. Otherwise. We use otherwise to show the bad result if we don't do something. We must get in. Otherwise, we fail. It is similar to or else. Silas looked around. He remembered the broken window from their first visit, the one the cat had jumped through. He pointed up. "Clara, give me a boost," he yelled. Clara locked her hands together to make a step. Silas stepped into her hands, and she pushed him up. He grabbed the ledge of the window and pulled himself inside. He landed on the dusty floor with a thud. He quickly turned and opened the main door for Clara. They were inside. The mill was filled with the sound of creaking wood and rushing water. It was pitch black. Silas took out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness. He swept the light across the room. There, in the center of the room, sat a pile of wooden crates. They were marked with the red danger symbol, dynamite. And sitting on top of the crates was a digital timer. The red numbers were counting down. 1500, 1459. 1458. 15 minutes, Clara whispered, her voice shaking. "We have 15 minutes to save the town." "Well, well," a voice said from the shadows. "You are persistent children." Silas shone the light toward the corner of the room. Mayor Green stepped out. He was holding a remote control in one hand and a flashlight in the other. He didn't look like a polished politician anymore. His suit was dirty, his tie was loose, and his eyes looked wild. He looked like a man who had lost everything. "Mayor Green," Silas said, stepping in front of the dynamite, "you have to stop this. If you blow up the dam, you will kill people. It's not just about money anymore." The mayor laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I didn't want to hurt anyone, Silas. I just wanted the land. But you and your meddling friend ruined everything. Had you not interfered, I would be a rich man by now. Let's pause and look at that grammar. Had you not interfered. This is a very advanced structure. It is a formal way of saying, if you had not interfered. It is a conditional sentence about the past. The mayor is blaming them. He thinks, cause equals you interfered. Effect equals I am not rich. You can still stop it, Clara pleaded. Turn off the timer. We won't tell anyone you were here. You can just leave. It's too late for that, the mayor snapped. The police are already looking for me thanks to your little stunt at the festival. My life is over. Unless I destroy the evidence and the town, I will go to prison. I prefer chaos to prison. The mayor raised the remote control. This remote speeds up the timer, he said. I set it for 15 minutes so I could get away. But since you are here, maybe I should just end it now. His thumb hovered over the red button. Silas's heart hammered against his ribs. He had to think fast. He couldn't fight the mayor. The mayor was bigger and stronger. He had to use words. He had to use logic. He had to understand the mayor's cause and effect thinking and break it. Wait, Silas shouted. Think about it. If you press that button, you die too. The water will hit this mill in 3 seconds. You won't escape. Provided that you let us go and turn off the timer, you might have a chance to run. Provided that is a great phrase. It means on the condition that, or only if. Silas is making a deal. The mayor hesitated. He looked at the door. He looked at the timer. 12 o'clock, 11:59. He didn't want to die. He just wanted revenge. I have a boat, the mayor said, glancing toward the back door that led to the river. I can make it. Not in this storm, Clara said, stepping forward. The river is too wild. You will capsize immediately unless you have help. The mayor looked conflicted. His hand shook. Silas realized that the mayor was not a brave man. He was a coward who used power to bully people. Now that he had no power, he was terrified. Suddenly, a loud crack of thunder shook the building. The distraction was enough. Silas didn't attack the mayor. Instead, he threw his flashlight at the mayor's face. The heavy metal light spun through the air. The mayor instinctively raised his hands to protect his face. He dropped the remote. Run! Silas yelled to Clara. But they didn't run to the door. They ran to the dynamite. Silas looked at the timer. 10:30. We have to turn it off, he yelled. I don't know how, Clara cried. It's too complicated. If we cut the wrong wire, it might explode instantly. The mayor recovered. He roared with anger and charged at them. He grabbed Silas by the back of his jacket and threw him to the floor. Silas slid across the dusty wood. The mayor then grabbed Clara. You foolish kids, he screamed. You should have stayed at the bakery. Silas scrambled to his feet. He looked around for a weapon. He saw a bag of old flour in the corner, left over from when the mill was active. It was heavy and hard as a rock. Silas picked it up. It weighed about 10 kilos. He lifted it over his head. Hey! Silas shouted. The mayor turned around. Silas threw the bag of flour with all his strength. It hit the mayor right in the chest. Whoosh! The bag burst open. A massive cloud of white flour exploded into the air, covering the mayor completely. He coughed and spluttered, blinded by the white dust. He let go of Clara to wipe his eyes. The timer! Silas shouted. Grab the timer! Clara grabbed the digital timer box connected to the dynamite. The wires were long. She pulled it as far as she could. It won't detach, she screamed. It's wired into the blasting caps. The mayor was stumbling around, wiping flour from his eyes. He was angry and dangerous. Silas knew they couldn't defuse the bomb. They didn't have the skills. Therefore, they had to get rid of it. The river window! Silas pointed to a large opening in the floor where the water wheel used to be. Below the hole, the river water rushed by with tremendous speed. We have to throw the dynamite into the river. The water will wet the fuses. It's too heavy, Clara said. There were 3 crates strapped together. Together, Silas yelled. On 3! The mayor lunged at them again, his hands grasping blindly. Silas kicked a chair in his path. The mayor tripped and fell hard onto the floor. Silas and Clara grabbed the ropes around the crates. 1, 2, 3! They heaved. The crates were heavy, but adrenaline gave them strength. They dragged the crates to the edge of the hole in the floor. The sound of the water below was deafening. They pushed. The crates tipped over the edge. Splash. The dynamite disappeared into the dark, churning water. Silas and Clara fell back onto the floor, panting. They waited. Would it explode? Seconds passed. Then, a dull thud came from deep underwater, far downstream. A plume of water shot up in the air about 200 meters away. The explosion had happened, but it was deep underwater and far away from the dam wall. The dam held. The mill shook slightly, but it didn't collapse. They were safe. The cause, the water, had prevented the effect, the destruction of the dam. The mayor sat up, covered in flour, looking like a white ghost. He looked at the empty spot where the dynamite had been. He looked at Silas and Clara. He realized he had lost completely. He slumped his shoulders and put his head in his hands. Suddenly, blue and red lights flashed through the windows. Sirens wailed over the sound of the storm. "The police," Clara said, smiling. "I sent my dad a location drop before we entered the mill. I told him, 'Come to the mill in case something happens.'" In case is a phrase we use to talk about precautions. We do something now in case something bad happens later. It was a smart move. The doors burst open. The police chief, Clara's father, ran in with 3 officers. They saw the mayor sitting on the floor covered in flour. They saw Silas and Clara safe. "Dad!" Clara ran to him. The chief hugged her tight. "Are you okay?" he asked. "We are fine," Clara said, "but you need to arrest him." She pointed at the mayor. The mayor didn't resist. He stood up slowly. An officer put handcuffs on his wrists. As they led him away, the mayor stopped and looked at Silas. "You possess a lot of courage for a baker," the mayor muttered. "I underestimated you." Silas stood tall. "I am not just a baker," Silas said. "I am a citizen of this town, and we look out for each other." The police took the mayor away. The threat was over. The storm outside began to calm down, as if the weather knew that the danger had passed. The next day, Oak Haven was a different place. The news had spread everywhere. Everyone knew what Silas and Clara had done. They knew that had it not been for their bravery, the town would be underwater. Had it not been for is another way to say, if it wasn't for. It gives credit to the cause. The Apple Festival continued for one more day to celebrate the victory. The sun was shining brighter than ever. Silas and Clara were treated like heroes. People shook their hands and patted them on the back. Mrs. Higgins was the proudest of all. She baked a special hero pie just for them. It was huge, filled with the sweetest apples and topped with a mountain of cream. They sat on the bench in the town square, eating the pie. They were tired, sore, and happy. "You know," Clara said, looking at the peaceful river, I learned something yesterday. What's that? Silas asked with a mouthful of pie. I learned that small actions have big effects, she said. If you hadn't noticed the broken lock, if we hadn't found the map, if we hadn't gone to the mill, everything would be different. It's like a domino effect. Silas nodded. Cause and effect, he said. It rules the world. But the most important cause is the choice we make. We chose to act. Consequently, the town is safe. Consequently, Clara repeated, laughing. You are using big words now. I am practicing, Silas smiled. I might need them. Mrs. Higgins says she wants to make me her business partner. She says she needs someone smart to run the bakery when she retires. Clara smiled. Partner? That sounds fancy. It is, Silas said. But I have one condition. What is it? I will only be partner provided that you are my chief investigator. I have a feeling this town might have more mysteries in the future. Clara laughed and clinked her fork against his. Deal. As they sat there, watching the town enjoy the festival, Silas felt a deep sense of peace. He realized that understanding the world, understanding the causes of things, gave him power. It gave him the power to change things. He wasn't just a victim of events anymore. He was a participant. And that is where we will leave Silas and Clara. They are safe, happy, and ready for whatever comes next. The mayor is in prison, the bakery is thriving, and the town of Oakhaven is more united than ever. So, what have we learned from this story? We have learned that language is not just about vocabulary lists and grammar rules. It is about connection. It is about understanding the relationship between events. When you listen to English, don't just listen for the nouns and verbs. Listen for the connectors. Listen for the logic. Let's review the advanced concepts we practiced in this final part. First, we used unless. Remember, unless means if not. For example, I will not go unless you go. This means, if you do not go, I will not go. Second, we used otherwise. This shows the negative consequence. Study hard, otherwise you will fail. Third, we used provided that. This creates a condition. You can borrow my car, provided that you fill the tank. And finally, we use the complex conditional had I known. This refers to the past. Had I known it was raining, I would have brought an umbrella. I have a final challenge for you. I want you to write the end of your own story in the comments. Tell me about a time you made a choice that had a big effect. Start your sentence with, had I not? For example, had I not studied English, I would not have found my new job. Or, had I not missed the bus, I would not have met my best friend. It has been an absolute pleasure telling this story to you. I hope you enjoyed The Baker's Secret. I hope it helped you listen better, understand deeper, and feel more confident. If you enjoyed this series, please share it. Send it to a friend, a classmate, or a teacher. And don't forget to subscribe to English in Fluency. We have many more stories, many more lessons, and many more adventures coming soon. I am Alex. Thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. And remember, keep listening, keep speaking, and keep connecting the dots. Until next time, take care and goodbye.